Autumn 1983, Elkhorn and Delavan, Wisconsin, Bray Road. We were Army reservists on a regular training exercise. We had radios, maps, and cold nights. Then the warning started. Farm animals were ripped apart. Claw marks were too high up for any bear. We heard noises circling our tents after dark. And then I saw it. Yellow eyes watching us from across the field. What attacked our group that night wasn't human, and it definitely wasn't a coyote. So before we continue, please make sure to like and subscribe to support the channel and comment down below where you're watching from. Thanks. I will tell it straight. No fancy words. No hero talk. I was a reservist back then, autumn of 1983, country areas of Wisconsin, Elkhorn and Delavan. The corn was as dry as paper. The fields were cut down to brown stubble. Maple trees were all bright red. Cold mornings that made your fingers hurt. You could smell animal manure, diesel fuel, and wood smoke. That clean Midwest smell that says the year is ending and winter is coming. We were out there for a weekend drill that turned into a long exercise. Cold War stuff, radios, maps, stay sharp in case the Soviets came rolling through the corn, which was silly, but it kept the commanders happy. We set up tents near Bray Road, just off a farm road. Trucks were parked in a messy line. Camouflage netting hung over them like wet laundry. I remember the netting more than I remember faces some days. I was Sergeant David Harland, 28 years old, born in Wisconsin. Nothing special. I took orders, gave orders, and kept the boys moving and out of trouble. I did my job and went home to a small rented place in Janesville, where the water heater wheezed like an old man. My team had Specialist McAllister. We called him Mac because of course we did. He was 30 years old, had hard eyes, a mean mouth, and smoked too much. He was the kind of guy who had seen some bad things and laughed at them out of the side of his face. He was good at everything that mattered and mean to everything that didn't. He'd say, "Sergeant, you worry about the young ones. I'll worry about the things that bite." We also had Private Louis Ortega, Chicago kid, barely 20, nervous, loyal, full of questions he tried to hide. He cleaned his rifle like he was praying with it. He liked to stand near me when it got dark. He laughed a second too late at jokes like he had to translate them in his head. Good heart, too good. Our contact with the local people was the Schmidt family, Carl and Ruth, 2 kids. Their farm was held together with duct tape, sweat, and hope. He had a handshake like a vice and a face burned raw by the wind. She had that Midwest mother look, stern but soft eyes, pie cooling on the windowsill. They let us fill our canteens. They let us park a truck by their old silo when one of ours started leaking oil. They waved from the porch like we were family. They were the kind of people who make a place feel solid, like the land is bigger than your orders. Normal stuff. We checked radios, static and call signs. "Bravo, this is Alpha, read you." That kind of thing. We walked the tree lines. Boots whispered in dry leaves. We laid out communication wire that got caught on every weed. We built a little sand pit to practice aiming our rifles. We smoked cheap cigarettes. We told lies about women. We complained about the Packers and argued whether this was their year, which in Wisconsin is the same as religion. We ate in town when we could. There was a diner in Elkhorn with a counter worn to a dull shine. Coffee that tasted like tar and saved your soul. Pie that was cold on the bottom and warm on top. Bacon that snapped when you bit it. You could hear the football game in the kitchen. We fed quarters into the jukebox. The waitress called us Hun. She liked Mac's smart mouth and warned him she had a brother bigger than him. He told her that was a mercy for the rest of us. She threw a dish towel at him. Everybody laughed. On the second day, we pushed closer to Bray Road. Trees there crowd the ditches. Big oak trees with roots like knuckles. When the wind slides off the marsh, it has a low hum. It makes you think of church organs and something in the rafters you don't want to see. You shake it off. You keep moving because you're a soldier and you have a map that says this square is yours. We set our tents in a rough circle near an old stone foundation that had sunk into the earth. Moss in the cracks. A third of a chimney left like a broken tooth. Someone once built a life there. Someone lost it. We hung ponchos, laid out our backpacks. Mac set up a trip line with a couple of noisemakers so we would hear deer or drunks coming in. He did it like he had done it 100 times before, which he had. Ortega watched like he was trying to memorize it for a test. That first night the sky was clear. Stars were sharp as tacks. Night vision flickered once and came back. We passed a thermos. We talked about deer season and whether the locals would hate us for spooking them. Ortega asked about the Soviets. I told him the Russians were too smart to come freeze in our cornfields. Mac said if they were dumb enough, he had a little welcome party planned. He patted a pouch and grinned. It sounded like a man patting a dog that bites strangers. I slept with my boots half on. Habit. Cold creeps up your legs out there. You dream of old heaters kicking on. You dream of your mother yelling that the door is open and heat is going to warm the whole neighborhood. Morning brought frost. A thin white skin on everything. We moved like old men until the coffee hit. The Schmidts drove by in their dusty pickup and honked. Carl handed us a bag of cheese curds through the window. Squeaky fresh. He said, "You boys watch yourselves." "A lot of talk about the woods this year," I asked. "What kind of talk?" He shrugged and made a face like he didn't want to look silly. "Coyotes," he said finally. "Big ones." Ruth tapped the dashboard like it had said something rude and told him to hush. We laughed about it later around the stove. Wolves, coyotes, whatever. We were men with rifles and orders and a schedule. The world had shapes and lines we could understand. It felt good and simple in the way only a lie can feel. The warnings came slow, like fog creeping across low ground. First, it was the talk at the diner. Old boys in seed caps leaning back and scratching their jaws. Words like "the beast" said half joking, said like a dare. A couple of farmers at the feed store told us something had been grabbing their livestock, split open like a bad deer on the road, cleaned out. No prints they could read. No tracks that made sense. They said the sheriff sent a deputy who took one look and said he had to make a call. Then nothing happened. Paperwork got lost. We chalked it up to small-town spook stories. You spend too much time under big sky and your mind starts reaching for monsters to fill it. That's what we said. That's how we kept the edges neat. Then we found the claw marks. Ortega spotted them first on a scout walk, way past cat scratches and high on a tree. Too high. We were on a narrow deer trail, leaves dead and slick under boots. The marks were fresh, sap still wet and bleeding. 4 lines, one longer like a thumb. I put my hand up next to it. The tips were above my head by half a foot. I'm not short. I felt stupid standing there with my fingers out like a kid looking for a match. "Bear," Mac said. He said it flat and quick, but he kept looking at the tree after he said it. You know that look. Eyes stay, but the mind walks away. He was doing math and he didn't like the numbers. At night we started hearing sounds that didn't care if we heard them. Not coyotes yipping. Not dogs barking. Low sounds, heavy. A growl without hurry. Footsteps in the brush with weight to them. Twigs crushed, then silence, then a slow step again. You can tell a deer. You can tell a raccoon. You can tell a man. This was none of that. It was like the ground moved and then pretended it hadn't. The radios began to spit static in dumb patterns. In the middle of a clean check, we would get a long string of hiss and this whistle like someone blowing across a bottle. Once there was a click-click pattern that made Ortega freeze. "You hear that?" he whispered. "That's someone keying and letting go, like a metronome." We waited for a voice, only the long hiss again like breathing too close to the mic. The Schmidts came by on the 3rd evening with a pie and a warning. Ruth put the pie in my hands and said, "You tell your boys to stay out of the woods after dark." I joked we were the ones folks called when things went bump in the night. She didn't smile. "Not this thing," she said. "Whatever's out there doesn't give a damn about your rank and file." Carl told us he had found one of his sheep torn open like a sack of grain. He said the rib cage was spread wide by something strong. He said there wasn't much blood. "That's wrong," he said like he was trying to convince himself. "That's wrong for a coyote." He looked at his hands like they were a map that led somewhere he didn't want to go. We tried to keep it light for the boys. Mac cracked jokes about corn goblins and dairy devils. Ortega laughed too hard. The younger troops started sleeping closer together. More coffee at night, less talk. You could feel something sliding in, like a draft no one can find the crack for. Men looked over their shoulders while they peed. They kept their rifles closer. You can laugh at a story. You can't laugh at the way your hands shake a little when you tie a bootlace. It started for real on a night when the sky went low and the woods breathed mist. We sent a patrol out on a loop to check our wire and move a little to keep warm. 2 men, good men. They stepped past the old foundation and into the trees. I watched their red filters bob and fade. I told them to keep to the trail and check in at the creek. They said, "Roger." I listened to their footfalls go soft and then gone. 10 minutes later, the radio coughed. Then nothing. Then that slow bottle whistle again. Click, 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 click. I keyed and said their call signs. No answer. Hiss. I looked at Mac. He shrugged like he wanted to shrug it away from himself. Ortega whispered, "They're screwing with us." I wanted that to be true. We gave it 5, then 10 minutes. No check-in from the creek. I grabbed my rifle and told Mac to hold the line here. I took Ortega. He stuck to my shoulder like a kid in a crowd. We moved quiet. The mist made the beams from our lights look solid, like we could lean on them. I told him to swing his light slow. No white flashes. We weren't spooking raccoons tonight. We found the creek. Ripple of water like a pocket full of coins. We found boot prints, and then we didn't. They just ended in the damp leaves. I don't mean they faded. I mean they ended. Hail to, nothing. Like the men went up instead of forward. Ortega made a sound in his throat. I hushed him. The radio hissed in my ear. I keyed again. Say again. You were off your route, hiss, bottle whistle. My mouth tasted like pennies. Then they were there. The 2 men. They stepped out from behind a tree so close Ortega almost shot. Eyes wide, faces gray like wet cement. They wouldn't say a word. I asked them what happened. They stared over my shoulder like I was blocking their view of a fire. One finally said he got turned around. The other shook, jaw working, teeth chattering like it was January. I put hands on both their shoulders and steered them home. Ortega kept looking up into the branches. He didn't know he was doing it. Back at camp, the 2 sat on their backpacks and wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. One threw up bile and said he was fine and then threw up again. The other said he didn't want to sleep. We gave them coffee. We gave them space. We didn't push, not yet. Sometimes if you push, a thing breaks that you can't fix. I did a walk by myself along the field's edge to clear my head. That was my mistake. I stopped by a fence post, leaning like it was a bar, and I was waiting on a drink. The field stretched out black and flat, and the mist rode just above it, thin like old gauze. That's when I saw them. Eyes. Too low at first. Then they rose. Yellow. Not catshine. Not deershine. Lantern yellow, old light. They watched me from the far side of the field. Too far for details. Close enough to feel like a hand on my chest. I lifted my rifle just a hair without meaning to. The eyes blinked. Then they weren't there. Not like they ran. Like someone turned them off. On the way back, I found the deer. Half of one. You know how coyotes eat. They drag and tear. This wasn't that. The rib cage was pried open. Flesh gone in neat scoops. The spine was cracked in a way I don't wish on bones. No blood pool. Not like it should be. The ground was only wet in spots like someone mopped. I took 2 steps back. I don't do that. I did. Then I marked the spot with a stick and we called the sheriff in the morning. He took a look and took a step back just like me. He said he would file a report. Then he said he had to go check something across the county and left so fast his dust had corners. Morale started to split like old paint. Jokes got mean or stopped. The younger ones whispered. The older ones smoked in groups and pretended not to look at the tree line every other minute. No one wanted to be alone. No one wanted to admit that out loud. The nights got teeth. You know how enemy contact builds in a normal training operation. One thing, then a pause, then something a little bigger. This wasn't that. It was like something circling and closing its loops. We heard it first around the camp. Footfalls that tested the edge, then pushed. Sometimes we would all stiffen at once like a dog that smells thunder. The trip line cans rattled, then stayed quiet like a hand touched them and held them still. We found claw marks in the morning. On the tree trunks by the trucks. On the tailgate of one truck. 4 lines deep fresh, a smear of sap-like tears. Ortega caught the worst of it. Latrine duty near midnight. He had his little red lens. He had his rifle slung. He had his pants half down when something grabbed him by the ankle and yanked like it was trying to pull a root from the earth. He yelled like a man falling down a well. We heard him. We all heard him. I ran with Mac and another man stumbling on ruts, rifles up, lights cutting the dark into ragged strips. We found Ortega face down in dirt, claw marks on his calf and forearm, like he had tried to fight his way loose, blood like dark paint on dry leaves. He was kicking at something we couldn't see. Not a man. Not a dog. just the sense of something there and wrong. We fired into the scrub without thinking. 3 quick shots. The slapping echo came back from the trees late, like it had been slowed by hands. The pressure came off Ortega like a tide sucking back. I don't have better words. I grabbed him and pulled him to the path. He was sobbing and cursing and trying to claw the dirt himself now, like he had changed sides mid-fight. We hustled him to the medkit. Cleaned and wrapped. The cuts were weird, torn but not jagged. Parallel lines shallow, but there was strength in the way they had scored him. He asked me if he was going to lose the limb. I told him no. I said it mean to make him believe it. His fingers wouldn't stop shaking. He tried to light a smoke and dropped it twice. Mac lit it for him and tucked it between his lips like a nurse. You owe me one, Mac said, voice rough. He didn't smile. Now the locals started talking less and locking more. The Schmitz kids stopped playing in the yard. The barn doors stayed shut. Carl drove into town with a rifle on the rack and eyes that never settled. He told me 2 of his calves were gone. Not dead. Gone. No tracks he could read. Just a deep mark in the mud, like something heavy had put down a hand and pushed itself up. He drew me a picture of that hand in the dust on his fender. 4 fingers and a thumb long in the wrong places. He wiped it away like it burned. Command heard the whispers. Our skipper, a butter bar who still had hope in his pockets, wanted to pull us and call it a night. Top shook his head tight and said Hire was watching the training numbers. He said orders say we finish out the week. He said, no one wants to explain why we ran from coyotes to the colonel. He looked at me while he said it. He knew it wasn't coyotes. He knew I knew. He still said the word because papers like simple words. The creature, or whatever you want to call it, pressed us harder. At night you could hear breath just outside the canvas. Slow calm. Not wind, not wind. Wind doesn't fog a man's breath in his own mouth. I lay there with my rifle up and my finger on the trigger and tried not to imagine a hand pressing down on the tent until the fabric touched my face. Tried not to imagine teeth closing on the barrel and biting it like a stick from a dog. We put guards on in pairs. No one alone. We put more noisemakers on the edge. They went off 4 times in one night. Each time we rushed to the spot and found disturbed leaves, heat hanging in the air like a body had just moved and nothing. Mac started talking less and listening more. That scared me more than the noises. It broke open on Bray Road late afternoon into dark. We had to move trucks to a new spot near the old farmhouse that the county said we could use as a staging point. It sat squat and alone among fields, shingles curling like dead fish. We loaded up, engines coughing in the cold, and rolled out. A small convoy. Headlights making tunnels in the early dark. We hit the stretch by the line of oaks, and that's where it came. The first truck saw a flash of movement in the ditch. The driver braked. Something big loped across the road like a man with bad knees and a mean purpose. The second truck clipped it. You could feel the thump in your ribs. Men yelled. Someone laughed that mad laugh you hear in car wrecks. Then it was on us. It came out of the ditch ahead and went straight at the lead jeep. Big. Too big. 7 feet if an inch when it stood full. Wolf head, not a costume. Not a mask. Not a dog head on a man's body. It was all one thing and all wrong. Ears back, teeth like icicles. Eyes that lantern yellow I had seen in the field. It hit the hood and the jeep hopped like a bucking horse. The windshield spiderwebbed. The driver screamed and stomped the gas and the thing slid off. Claws tearing a long metal shriek down the hood. We opened up. Rifles spinning. M16 is a fast talker. We gave it a sermon. The creature jerked once like it had been poked with a stick, and then it moved again. Faster. It darted in and slapped at a fender and a tire blew. It grabbed a man by his web gear and flung him into the ditch like he weighed nothing. He came up gasping with mud in his mouth and eyes like a deer in a spotlight. The younger guys fired high. Full panic. Tracers went into the sky and wrote dumb stories up there. I yelled to aim low and watch your sectors. I sounded like a training tape. Mac fired in 3s. Hard and patient. He hit meat, I know it. I could hear the smack. The thing didn't care like it should. It moved wrong. Fast and then still. Close and then gone. Like bad film. Like frames missing. It lunged at the jeep again. And for a heartbeat I saw its hands on the hood. Hands. 4 long fingers and a thumb. Pads like a dog. Nails like black knives. We backed the convoy up by inches. Men yelling, metal squealing. The thing paced us on the ditch line. It didn't run full. It just stayed there, trotting, head cocked like it was curious how long it would take us to break. It huffed. That was the worst part. That steady huffing breath. Not winded, not excited. Just there, like a man breathing while he works. We made the turn by the farmhouse and it let us go. Just peeled off into the trees with a twitch like a smirk. No chase, no roar. Just gone. We sat there with engines dying and brakes clicking, men looking at their hands like they belonged to someone else. The road was quiet in that fake way right after a fight, like the world had gone into the next room for a drink. "What the hell is this for?" one of the boys said, slapping the side of his rifle. He sounded hurt like he had been lied to his whole life. I didn't have an answer. I told them to reload and check each other for holes. I told them to shut up and move. Orders are a life raft. You hand them out and hope they float. After that, sleep left us. It didn't even pretend. We took turns lying down, but no one slept. Not the deep kind. Every branch tap was a footstep. Every snap was a claw. Ortega started seeing things at the edge of the light. He would brace and raise his rifle and then lower it slow. Breath rattling. He asked me if I had ever seen a wolf walk on two legs. I told him I hadn't. He said, "We're not supposed to be here." I asked where we were supposed to be. He said, "Home." He meant he wanted his mom's kitchen. He wanted linoleum under his feet and a clock on the wall. He wanted anything that made sense. The Schmidts came once more. Not to chat, not to bring pie. Carl stood at the barbed wire with his cap in his hands like he was at a funeral. He said they took them. All of them. He meant his animals. Every last one. Not dead in the field. Just gone from the barn in the night. No tracks out. No broken latch. Just absence that rang like a bell. Ruth wouldn't get out of the truck. Her face looked stretched. She stared at the farmhouse door behind us like she expected it to open and end her life. We picked up new signs in the woods. Torn gear. A boot with the laces shredded like spaghetti. A canteen ripped open so clean it looked cut with a knife. And then we found the knife nearby, bent at a dumb angle. We found a helmet with the chin strap torn and a dent in the shell, like someone had put a thumb in clay. We did a head count until we were sick. We were whole for the moment. That night the screams came. Not coyotes, not foxes. A man's scream that breaks into animal before it ends. It came from the trees beyond the trucks. I hustled a fire team out along the fence line and we found signs of drag. Leaves scraped clean in lines that curved and crossed. Blood dotted like a bad painter's brush. We followed until the trail went up a steep root-snagged rise and then stopped, like someone had cut the world in half and taken the top piece away. We called and called. Got nothing back but our breath and that bottle whistle on the radio. We found pieces the next morning. Not enough to bury, right? A sleeve with an arm still in it. The patches torn off like trophies. A boot with weight still inside, I won't say more. I can still smell it. I can still hear the younger boys gag without trying to be quiet. We took what we could and put it in a poncho and stood in a tight circle around it, like men around a small fire. Mac said a prayer he pretended he didn't know. Ortega held his head like it might split. I had to work to unclench my jaw to speak words. We sent a runner to the road for the sheriff again. He didn't come this time. Some of the men talked about going home on foot, walking west until the lights looked human again. Top shut that down with a voice I had never heard from him, strong enough to make me stand straighter without meaning to. "We don't scatter," he said. "We hold." He was right. Men who scatter die. Men who hold sometimes live. That's the best we could aim at. The worst part, worse than the dead and the drags and the screams, was when we found the second set of prints. The first set was the usual wrong. Long toes, pads, claws. The second set was smaller and fresher. A pair that trailed the first and then split and circled up. We looked at each other and every face said the same thing. More than one, this wasn't a lone freak. This was a pack or a family or whatever thing monsters have that stands in for that word. I started counting hours to dawn like a man in a cell. The nights stretched. The days were thin and bright and full of lies. We fixed gear that wasn't broken. We pulled security on the trucks like they were a church. We made a plan to fall back to the farmhouse if it got worse. That was our Alamo, we joked. The joke sounded like coughs. We moved to the farmhouse at last light the next day. We did it fast but tidy. Boxes of ammo, water cans, radios. We barred the doors and nailed shut the ground floor windows with ripped planks from the old shed. The place smelled like mouse pee and mold and something old living in the walls. The stairs creaked like tiny screams. The wallpaper had flowers that had died 3 times. We set fields of fire. We placed flares near the road. We put a couple of little surprises out front. Nothing fancy. A few pounds of boom in the ditch wired to a clacker. Mac did that part without being asked. He whistled a tuneless nothing while he worked, which he only did when he was scared. Night dropped like a sack. The woods went quiet. Then they came. You could feel it more than hear it at first. Like a pressure change. Like weather moving through a room. Then the footsteps. Not sneaking now. All around, pacing, testing. Something pounded on the back wall once. The plaster shed dust like old flour. We kept the lights low. We listened to our own breath and the old house breathing with us. They circled. They dragged claws down wood to see if we'd twitch. They pushed on a shutter and laughed in that huffing way when it rattled. One padded up on the porch and sniffed at the door gap. The smell came through. Wet dog and grave dirt. Ortega started praying under his breath. Mac told him to make it louder or shut up. He said it mean, but his hands were shaking like paper. The first charge hit near midnight. A slam against the front door like a log swung by a truck. The wood bowed and held. Nails screamed. We fired through the panels. The door jumped in its frame. Black shapes darted past the windows. The flares popped outside and threw a stupid red light over everything. In that light I saw 2 of them in the yard, heads low, pacing with that same curious look. They moved like men who had been told they owned the place. We put rounds on one and it spun and went to a knee, and then it was up again and gone beyond the edge of the flare's dumb radius. Something hit the rear window. Hands over face and peered in. Eyes yellow, teeth wet. A low sound rattled the glass like an engine idle. Mac fired and the window blew. The thing shrieked and fell backward, and there was this fast trampling and then nothing. The house was full of hot metal smell and dust and fear. They tested us like that for an hour, maybe more. Time turned to wet rope. It stretched and slipped. Then they got serious. The north wall took a pounding like a machine. The door blew inward on the 3rd hit and a shape came through halfway. Shoulders too wide. Head low, Mac didn't hesitate. He ran forward, grabbed the clacker and rolled out the side door like he had rehearsed it in his bad dreams. On me, he yelled, like he was dragging us by the spine. I knew the wire runs, the little ditch charge he had set. It would hurt them if it was close. It would kill a man if he was stupid enough to be near it. Mac wasn't stupid. He was tired of being hunted. He ran into the yard, firing short to draw them. He screamed at them to come on. He called them ugly sons of dogs and worse. He laughed a laugh that sounded like a broken saw. One of the creatures came for him, all speed and hate, head low, front long legs pawing at the dirt like a horse that just remembered it was a wolf. Mac backed toward the ditch. The thing leaped. Mac squeezed the clacker. The night went white and then black. The boom popped my ears and slammed the house like a wave. When you see a mine go off that close, you expect pieces. I'll tell you what I remember. A wet thud, a high keen, a smell like burnt hair and hot pennies. The creature screamed in a way that made my molars hurt. It thrashed in the ditch, half there, half not. Another one darted forward and tugged at it like a mother dog grabbing a pup. Mac stood there, wrong-footed and proud, and then another shape came out of the dark and hit him from the side. He went down hard and fast, and the black of them folded over him like a closing hand. We tore the yard with fire. We fired until rifles clicked, and we ran new magazines home and fired more. The flares burned out one by one. The yard went back to night. The house shook with feet on the porch roof. Nails worked loose under claws. We dragged the door back up and braced it with a dresser that exploded into sawdust under the next hit. I yelled orders I don't remember. I smelled blood from my own mouth where I had bitten my cheek and didn't feel it. At some point the pounding slowed. At some point the huffing moved away. At some point the night thinned and greased itself toward dawn. We sat in a half circle, rifles up, eyes like sandpaper. We said nothing. We waited for the next hit. It didn't come. When the light finally showed, pale and weak, we stepped out into the yard like men stepping onto a church floor. Slow, careful. The ditch was a mess. Dirt and meat and hair and a black smear I will take to my grave. There were prints all around. The big ones and the smaller ones. There were drag marks away toward the tree line, and there was Mac. Pieces of him. Enough to know. Enough to gather. I put my hand on what was left of his shoulder and felt heat. I told him thank you. I told him it should have been me. I told him things a man says to the dead when he thinks no one hears. Ortega stood in the yard, shaking and laughing and crying all at once.
He kept saying he did it.
He got one. I didn't say what I knew. We hadn't got one. We had only made them bleed. That's not the same as winning. The trucks rolled in late morning, green ghosts with loud engines. We had called for pullout the moment the radio took a breath and gave us a clean line. A colonel's voice came over and said words like secure sight and hold fast. When those trucks came, I felt my knees try to go soft with relief and rage. Men in clean uniforms got out and took a long look without looking like they were looking. They told us to drink water and sit in the shade. They took pictures. They measured. They put markers in the dirt like little white lies. They zipped what we had of Mac into a bag with a quiet sound that will wake me up when I'm old. They took the poncho of the other man we had lost 2 nights before. They boxed our empty brass. They asked questions with answers already printed on their clipboards. Did you see a bear? Did you engage coyotes? Did you take friendly fire? I said the word beast and watched the major flinch like I had thrown water on him. He told me never to use that word. He told me this was a training incident with tragic outcomes. He told me to sign a paper I signed. That's what soldiers do. The Schmidts were gone that afternoon. Just gone, pickup loaded, barn doors swinging open on nothing. I found a note on their porch. It said, "Thank you, sorry." It felt like a funeral card. I stood there and listened to the wind move through an empty place and thought, that's how it happens. People don't leave homes for no reason. Something knocks and they go. Ortega left the army not right away. He came back to drill once or twice and sat like a man in a church where the sermon isn't meant for him. He jumped at doors closing and laughed at the wrong places in movies. He asked me for a letter and I wrote him a good one. He went home to Chicago, and I hope he found a small apartment with a loud street and a neighbor who plays music too late. City noise is a blessing if you know why. The official story says a lot of nothing. It says we encountered wildlife during training. It says 2 fatalities. It says weather and stress were factors. It says the sheriff's department investigated livestock losses and found no criminal activity. It says the base commander saw no need for further action. It says classified at the bottom. That word is a rug you can sweep whole lives under. Years later, I drove down Bray Road again. I didn't plan it. I was passing through and the truck turned like it had a mind. The oaks are older. The farmhouse is gone now. Only a depression and some weeds and a couple of stones that were once something. The ditch is still there. The field still breathes. The wind still brings that low hum off the marsh, the one that makes you feel watched. I got out and stood by the fence where I had seen the eyes that first night. I waited until the late sun went thin and the first chill climbed my sleeves. I didn't see them. Not the eyes. Not the shapes. But I felt it. That pressure change, like a door opening in a house you thought was empty. Like a breath on the back of your neck when you're alone. I said Mac's name out loud and it came out like a cough. I told him I still owed him. I told him if he wanted me to run, I wouldn't. I stood there until a truck from town rolled by and the driver slowed and looked at me like I was a drunk or a ghost. I went back to my truck and sat with the door open and my boots in the grass and thought about monsters. Real ones, not the movie kind. The ones that live right up against the fence line of our days. The ones that come out when the corn is cut and the nights are longer than the mornings. The ones that circle and test and laugh in their huffing way when the door rattles but holds. The ones that make a man into something else because he has to be. The boys who were with me, what's left of us, we don't talk much. When we do, we talk around it. We say things like, remember that cold snap? And Mac was a good one. We don't say the word beast because it feels like calling a dog that still knows the way home. We drink and we tell the same dumb jokes about the Packers and we check the shadows in the room without meaning to. The younger ones who were there then are older now. They carry it different. You can see it if you know what to look for. The little twitch at a window thump. The way they sit with their backs to walls. The way they count doors in new places without counting. I know what I saw. I know what it didn't do when we shot it. I know the way it moved and breathed. The way it just wasn't where it had just been. I know it had hands, not paws, and a head that was wrong on a body that could stand up and look you in the eye. I know wolves. This wasn't that. I know men. This wasn't that either. It's its own thing. And it lives in the wet, low places and the oak-shadowed ditches where the road bends and you slow down without thinking about why. You can say this is a story. You can say I'm making campfire smoke into shapes. I'll hand you my name and my time, and you can write it down on your little clipboard and call it what you want. I have my own words for it. They're simple words. We were hunted by something that knows our roads. That's enough to end a night's sleep for the rest of your life. I drive different now on back roads. I keep the windows up. I keep a hand on the wheel and the other on the seat, palm down, feeling the vibration. If it changes, if the road tells me it doesn't want me here, I listen. When I pass old farm places, I look for signs. Missing animals and doors nailed from the inside. I see them too often. When autumn comes and the leaves turn that sick, beautiful color and the cornfields look like shaved heads, and the air gets that clean cold bite, I think of Bray Road. I think of Mac in the yard under a bad red flare, his hand steady on a clacker, his mouth open in a hard laugh. I think of Ortega's hand shaking and the way it stopped when I grabbed it, and said his name like it mattered more than orders. I think of the Schmidts driving away until the dust lost its edges. People ask if I believe in monsters. I tell them no. I tell them I believe in things we don't have good words for. I believe in cold breath on canvas and claw marks where no bear can reach and eyes that blink off like a light. I believe in orders that say hold when every part of you says run. I believe in doors that rattle and hold because men with shaking hands put nails through soft wood and said, not tonight. If you find yourself out there near Elkhorn when the year is closing and the sky is too big and the road names are old and the ditches are wet, do me a favor. Don't stop if you see eyes in the field. Don't follow a noise into the trees. Don't say the word out loud like it's a joke you heard at the diner. Keep your windows up. Keep driving. And if the radio starts to hiss and whistle like a bottle, if you hear click-click in a steady beat, if your chest goes tight like a hand pressed it, you call the ones you love and tell them you'll be late. Tell them you got turned around for a minute. Tell them you'll be fine. Then keep going. Keep going until the lights show and the diner smell hits and someone calls you hun. And the jukebox is dumb and perfect and the coffee saves you one more time. If you can't keep going, if you have to stop, if the door shakes and you can't fix it, do what we did. Nail it, brace it, watch your sectors. Say the names of your dead and thank them for standing. When dawn finally comes, don't look too long at the tracks in the yard. Don't follow the drag marks. Drink water, stand up, move out, don't say beast, don't give it that. Let it have the fields and the ditches and the old stone foundations where lives sank. Let it have Bray Road and the places like it you'll never know. Leave it there, but know this. It's not gone. Some things don't leave. They wait, so that's the end of our video. If you made it this far, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free. And if you want more terrifying encounters like this one, check out the other videos on screen right now. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there. See you soon.